This segment brought to you by our good friends at America First Policies. You know, I've been saying for 30 years that NAFTA is a disaster. By the way, so is Curtis Ellis, who's coming up in a minute. And back then, there were only like 3 people that didn't like NAFTA. Me, Curtis Ellis, Pat Buchanan, and Trump. That's it. Well, we finally replaced it. After decades of empty promises from both parties in D.C., we got it done. Our negotiators have struck a new, better trade deal with Mexico. It's a better deal because it means more cars will be made in the U.S., American farmers more food to Mexico, American factory workers will get a raise. It means that giant sucking sound that Ross Perot predicted in the 92 presidential campaign, the sound of jobs heading to cheap south of the border labor, is finally over kaput. This deal puts America and Americans first, as promised by you-know-who. Call Congress today, 202-224-3121, 202-224-3121. Tell them to support the new U.S.-Mexico trade agreement. For more information, go to americafirstpolicies.org. This message paid for and authorized by America First Policies Incorporated. Joining us now from America First Policies Incorporated, Senior Policy Advisor, long-term member of the Trump campaign, Trump Transition Team, Department of Labor, American Jobs Alliance, and ally, FOJ, ally on trade with John Fredericks for years. My man, Curtis Ellis, back from vacation. Well, we had the day off anyway. Hey, Curtis, great to have you.
Hey, it's great to be here. Happy day after Labor Day.
I know. So the president doubling down with China again, another $200 billion. I mean, not even blinking an eye. And what he said is this. He says, look, this is a war, if you want to call it that. This is a battle. This is a chess game, whatever. He says, we can't lose because we have consumers that they want. They don't really have consumers that we want. We got $580 billion flowing their way. They cheat. They rob. The Chinese, they steal, they manipulate currency, they dump, they subsidize, and I just want an even playing field. And he said, at the end of the day, they need our consumers a lot more than we need theirs. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely right. Their economy is based on exporting to the U.S. That's what their whole house of cards is built on. So let's get them acting right, or they can find somebody else to sell to. You know, we keep hearing from people like the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and other globalist shills like that 95% of consumers live outside the U.S. Trade is so important. Well, let the Chinese find, let them find those 95% of the consumers outside the U.S. You know, they can sell their stuff to Botswana, where people live on $1 a week. I'm sure there's a lot of consumers there that could buy all the stuff that's filling up the shelves of Walmart and Kmart. I mean, this is absolutely ridiculous.
That is such a great argument. If the Chamber of Commerce, which I agree, the Chamber is the globalist shill of all times, right? It's the biggest lobbying snake pit you can imagine. What does Tom Donahue make there, like $700,000 or something? Head of a trade organization. It's a globalist shill. But look, what you just said, you nailed it. I mean, 95% of all the world's trade is coming from other countries. Then let China, then why does China need us?
Right. Why is China complaining? Why is China worried?
They should be happy.
Everything the U.S. Chamber has been telling us all these years, every time a free trade deal comes up, the whole Trans-Pacific Partnership, we've got, and Paul Ryan was there with them, the soon-to-be retired Paul Ryan. We need these trade deals because 95% of consumers live outside the U.S. Well, then China should be happy. It's like, okay, great. We got a clear shot at 95% of the world's consumers. Who needs the United States? It's already working. Ford has decided that they are not going to import cars made in China. They said the 25% tariff makes it unfeasible for them to make a buck by importing. They were going to build a new sports utility vehicle in China and sell it in the United States. Ford has canceled those plans. So happy Labor Day, everybody. It's working.
Look, I mean, that's real, right? Because remember, in fact, Curtis, how many men on the radio really upset with the Ford Motor Company for going to China? And basically,
now, GM, they build this Buick Envision, a Buick sports SUV,
right.
And that's made in China. They're selling it here, and General Motors, the American taxpayers bailed them out, right? Rebuilt the company, bailed them out. The American taxpayers pay to fund a Navy that keeps the shipping lanes open, keeps the trade routes open. So GM can repay the gratitude to the American taxpayers and the American workers by building vehicles in China and selling them in the United States. So, yeah, they're great.
But
Ford
now
did the right thing. General Motors, not so much.
Yeah, but now they have a tariff.
Yeah, now they have a tariff.
And so now they're screwed because they've already made the decision to thumb their nose at patriotism, U.S. workers, right thing to do, right? And it's all based on shareholder value. Right? Which is one of the things we've been arguing about. Is that
a doctrine that was really fairly recent. It evolved in the 1980s that says companies their only responsibility is to their shareholder, to the shareholders. They have to boost the stock price at whatever cost. It used to be, they used to teach in business school that the CEO, the great captains of industry, had to juggle more than one ball. They had to juggle a lot of balls. They had responsibility to the shareholders. They had a responsibility to their suppliers, to their workforce, to the community that built the roads and ports and provided courts, roads that they traveled that they shipped their products on. They had a responsibility to the communities that provided schools that educated the people, taught the people how to read so they could work in the factories that the shareholders benefited from. They even had a responsibility to the country as a whole because, the country provides courts and enforces laws and contracts and things like that, property rights. But it was the responsibility of the CEO and the managers to balance all these interests and make sure they made a profit, right? At the end of the day, make money, right? But they had to keep a few balls in the air doing that. Well, then along came Neutron Jack Welch, and a General Electric CEO, and he had the brilliant idea that, that's too complicated. Our only responsibility is to make money for the shareholders. And any way we can do it is great. They called him Neutron Jack because he was the neutron bomb. He came in and he got rid of the people, but he kept the hard assets, right? So he would, he decimated the workforce, moved everything overseas as much as he could, turned General Electric, which was once a manufacturing company, into a financial services company. GE basically was in the business of lending money, financing products. That's where it made most of its money. And when you think of shareholders, you think, like my 401k. I think of that some little old lady sitting in a room somewhere, clipping coupons, dividend coupons, with too much perfume on, right? She's wearing too much perfume and she's sitting in her old age home in her room and she's looking at her dividend coupons and this is the money. No, like 80 to 90% of the stocks in this country are owned by institutional investors. They're owned by, big pension funds, or they're owned by huge Wall Street hedge funds, things like that. So this shareholder value was the thing which has destroyed America, destroyed the real economy as opposed to the financial services sector economy. So it's and that's why other places like Europe still has manufacturing, because they still understand that it exists, a company's profitability exists within a larger context than it exists within the context of a society. We have more than an economy. We have a society and a country. But that's too hard for some people to understand. It's kind of early in the morning to go into this. But
well, no, Curtis, so what happened is, and this is an important aspect of this, and this is why we appreciate having you on. And trust me, our listeners want this information. They want to understand what is going on. So what happened after Neutron Jack so that people really get this, is that in the business schools of America, the Harvards, the Whartons, the top business schools, MIT, things of that nature, they started changing the way they taught MBA programs.
Right.
And all of the focus was on, look, if you run a company, if you run a division, it's all about shareholder value. That is for the owners. It's all about the owners. And so people and workers are now not looked upon as assets that you have a moral responsibility or a financial responsibility to uplift, but they're just a commodity. So it's like buying a copper wire. If you can find a copper wire cheaper in China, you buy it. If you can find a worker cheaper in Vietnam or Bangladesh or Timbuktu, that's where you get the labor, because that will drive the margin to drive the shareholder value. And it doesn't really matter about what it does to the U.S. worker, what it does to the buying power of the consumers. None of that matters. What matters is, are you driving profit in the short term, which is driving your stock, which is driving money for your shareholders. That's it. That was a change in thinking.
And I sometimes think of it that it's like that it's part of a larger context, which is even more insidious. That you could not have this attitude. And by the way, I worked for Lou Dobbs at one time, and he really took this apart. This is like 10 years ago when he was still on CNN, 12 years ago. And he used to ridicule us. He said, "Oh, this is the great geniuses of business school, of Harvard Business School, that they just find the cheapest labor on earth, and that's how you make a profit. That's the best they can do. You need a degree to figure that out." But I think this, in a larger context, how could you possibly say that? And what you say is true. They just see workers as a commodity, not as people, not as human beings. How could you look at that? How could you treat people as commodities and not as the humans they are? How could you reduce your country to just a spreadsheet and have no concern for the Little League teams and churches that are supported by the companies, their charity donations, your neighbor, the people down the street? How can you do that? It's part of a larger dehumanization, and this is like a much more brutal form of capitalism than ever existed in this country. And I wonder if it's part of the secularization of society, that there is no higher God than how much money can you make. That's all that matters. How much stuff can we get? And look, Abe Lincoln figured it out back then, 150 years ago, that consumers must be producers, or you won't have the money to be consumers. He figured it out. Henry Ford understood it. You want your workers to earn enough to buy the products they make. That way you're creating a mass market as well as products. And Lincoln saw at the time it was the British who were pushing this free trade idea. They wanted Americans to just supply cotton to the textile mills in Great Britain. That's it. And Lincoln's people said, this is a waste of labor. We have people, you want to put the textile mills close to where they're growing the cotton. The more concentrated and closer together you put all these productive assets, the more productive everybody becomes. You're not shipping stuff around the world and miles to turn the raw materials into finished products. Put it right next to each other. And everybody becomes richer in the process. Well, it was cheaper and more efficient to grow cotton on slave plantations and then have the British turn it into fabric and textiles, where people worked 12, 15 hours a day, 7 days a week. Sure, that was more efficient. Was it better? No. We have a much better country for doing it the way we did it.
Right. So basically, during that time, the United Kingdom, or England at the time, wanted to just have the permanent economic colonization of the United States.
That's right. And now we have China. And at the time, Britain viewed itself as the workshop of the world. And that's what they called themselves. That's what everybody understood them to be. That was their policy. That was their goal. That was their pride. Rule Britannia and workshop of the world. And now it's China that is the workshop of the world. And the multinational companies working hand in glove with the Chinese Communist Party want to turn China into the workshop of the world, and the rest of the world will be a colony, a resource colony for these multinational companies. But what they fail to understand is that the Chinese Communist Party will not be content with that, and they will take the assets. They don't want. They will take it over from the multinational companies, and that the multinational companies must be Chinese. The Chinese have the ambition to have their own multinational companies that will colonize the rest of the world. And so Neutron Jack's successors and his heirs, they'll be dealt out of the game. They never counted on that, but they short-term thinking again, and it's coming to bite them right in the rear end.
Just as it should. We're with Curtis Ellis, Senior Policy Advisor, America First Policies. So, Curtis, the president not backing down on any of this, making a NAFTA deal with Mexico, tremendous concessions by the Mexicans. They saw the writing on the wall. They did the right thing. They owned up to it. And then the Canadians said, no, now they're out.
Yeah. Well, the Canadians aren't done yet. We actually have another 30-some days to reach an agreement with Canada, or for Canada to reach an agreement with us. And that will and still fall within all the timelines and countdown clocks and everything set up by the fast-track laws that are in place. So Friday was the past Friday was a nice deadline, but really not the drop-dead deadline. The Canadians, I believe, will come around. They stake not to. President Trump is playing a hard game. Good for him. And Justin Trudeau really misplayed his hand horribly when he played to the grandstands at the G7 and decided he was going to be the tough guy against Donald Trump. That was I got to laugh because it's so hilarious to think about this pretty boy matinee star, good looks young Trudeau thinking he can just sashay across the stage and say whatever he wants and
not
do
so
whatever
fast,
he wants.
Right?
And
not so fast. He's got another 30 days to figure this out. Meantime, Curtis Ellis, we're out of time. As you know, we'll be at FAIR the next 2 days, the Federation of American Immigration Reform at the Phoenix Park Hotel, the lovely Phoenix Park Hotel. Curtis, we look forward to you popping by and having a little fun with us there. Got a great lineup for you. Thank you for being with us today, Curtis Ellis, America First Policies. He's a senior advisor